So, have you ever pulled an all-nighter, just cramming for a test, feeling like you've totally nailed it, only to have your mind go completely blank the next day? Yeah, if that sounds familiar, it's not you, it's your strategy. The good news? Cognitive science has basically cracked the code on how to actually learn. And today, we're going to give you the keys.
We've all said this, right? Or at least heard someone say it. In our culture, multitasking is worn like this badge of honor, like it's some kind of superpower for productivity. But what if I told you that exact belief is actually sabotaging your ability to learn and get anything meaningful done?
Because here's the honest-to-goodness truth. Our brains do not multitask. It's a myth. When you think you're juggling 5 things at once, what you're really doing is just switching between them really, really fast. And that constant, frantic switching, it comes at a huge cognitive cost. This is what we call the efficiency lie. See, it feels super productive. But in reality, every single time you switch tasks, you're forcing your brain to slam on the brakes and then refocus. This leads to way more errors, and it takes so much longer to get everything done. So if you really want to be effective, it's time to ditch the multitasking myth and start working with your brain, not against it. Okay, so if doing everything at once is a bad idea, what's the alternative? Well, the answer lies in understanding this really cool fundamental design of our minds. Your brain basically operates with 2 different gears for thinking. And the real secret to learning? It's knowing exactly when to shift from one to the other. So think of it like this. Your brain is a car. First gear is what we call focused thinking. This is you in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, intensely concentrating on a problem. Like solving a math equation. But then there's a second gear, diffuse thinking. Now you're in the passenger seat, just relaxed, looking out the window, letting your mind wander. Both are absolutely critical, but they do completely different jobs. And the really amazing thing is just how powerful that second gear is. You ever had a brilliant idea just pop into your head while you're taking a shower or out for a walk? That, right there, is your diffuse mode at work. When you actually step away from a problem, your subconscious mind keeps tinkering in the background, making these creative connections that your focused brain would have just plowed right past. So, here's the most important part. Effective learning isn't about picking a gear and staying there. No, the real magic happens when you learn to cycle between them. You go hard for, say, 25 minutes, super focused on a concept, and then you take a 5-minute break to just walk around and let your mind drift. That cycle, focus, relax, that lets you soak in the details and see the big picture. And this brings us to our next big, kind of counterintuitive idea. What if I told you that the very best way to learn something is to actually make it harder for yourself? I know it sounds completely backward, but it is one of the most powerful truths in the science of learning. Let's go back to that all-nighter, right? You cram for hours, the information feels so fresh, so fluent. You feel like you've got it locked down. But then you sit down for the test and poof, it's gone. Your mind is a complete blank. So what is going on there? To get why cramming is such a disaster, Professor Robert Bjork says we have to understand the difference between performance and learning. See, performance is like building a sandcastle. It's fast, it looks impressive right now, but it is incredibly fragile. One wave and it's gone. Learning, on the other hand, that's like building a house out of brick. It's slower, it's way more effort, but it is durable. It's built to last. And this is where this awesome concept of desirable difficulties comes into play. These are learning strategies that are intentionally harder in the moment. So instead of just rereading a chapter, you try to summarize it from memory. It feels tougher, for sure, but that little bit of struggle is precisely what builds strong, long-term knowledge. It's basically like lifting a heavy weight to build muscle, but for your brain. Okay, so you're ready to actually put this stuff into practice? Let's get to the good stuff. Science has given us a whole toolkit of these strategies, but here are the big 3 that will totally change how you learn: spacing, interleaving, and good old-fashioned testing. Let's break them down. All right, so how do we actually build all these powerful ideas into a daily routine? Let's start with a really simple, really elegant system that helps you manage those brain gears and get into that perfect rhythm for learning. Meet the Pomodoro Technique. This thing is an absolute game changer. It's just a brilliantly simple way to structure your work around how your brain naturally operates. The 25-minute sprint, that's pure, uninterrupted focus mode. But that little 5-minute break, that's where the magic happens. That is not wasted time. That is your scheduled, deliberate shift into diffuse mode to let all those background connections start to form. Okay, now let's level up. When you combine that Pomodoro cycle with the principles of desirable difficulties, you create a learning system that is frankly unstoppable. This is the toolkit that will actually rewire your brain for deep, lasting knowledge.
So here's how it looks. Instead of that last-minute cram session, you use spacing, studying for shorter chunks of time over several days. Instead of grinding on one subject for hours, you use interleaving. You mix in different topics or different types of problems. And most importantly, instead of just passively rereading your notes, you actively test yourself on the material.
I know it sounds almost too simple to be true, but the research on this is just overwhelming. Actively trying to pull information out of your own memory, they call it retrieval practice. It is one of the single most powerful learning tools we have. Every time you recall an answer from your own brain, you are strengthening those neural pathways. It's literally like doing a bicep curl for your memory. So look, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Real, effective learning isn't supposed to feel easy. The goal is not comfort. The goal is growth. It's time to stop optimizing for what feels fluent in the short term and start training for long-term cognitive strength. You have to embrace the struggle because that's where the real learning is. You see, these aren't just clever little study hacks. They're fundamental principles, grounded in the very wiring of our brains. All they ask is that you trade a little bit of short-term comfort for some incredible long-term capability. So the real question isn't how to learn anymore. It's now that you have the playbook, what are you going to master?